The form had exactly 47 questions. Counselor Yema had used it for 300 years, processing over 200 species into the Galactic Coalition. No species had ever needed more than one session to complete it. Until the humans arrived. Yema's 4 arms moved across her data screens with practiced ease. Her compound eyes studied the human sitting across from her. His name was Drell Hansen, and he looked remarkably calm for someone representing a species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel 6 years ago. Question 31, Yema said, her mandibles clicking softly. Total number of interspecies conflicts in your recorded history. 0, Drell said. We only just met other species. Yema marked the answer, simple enough. Question 32, total number of interspecies conflicts. Drell paused, he scratched his chin. Could you clarify that? Wars, Yema explained. Organized violent conflicts between groups of your own species. Right, Drell pulled out a small tablet. Which century would you like me to start with? Yema's mandibles stopped moving. Her assistant, a young Sylvian named Paula, looked up from her notes with confusion. I do not understand the question, Yema said carefully. Well, we have about 5,000 years of recorded history, Drell said. He spoke the way someone might discuss the weather. Wars happened in pretty much all of them, so I need to know where you want me to begin. Paula made a small sound of distress. Yema raised one of her arms to calm her. Perhaps there is a translation error, Yema suggested. We are asking for significant conflicts, wars that shaped your civilization. Yes, I understood that. And you are saying these occurred in multiple centuries. Drell actually laughed. It was a short, soft sound. Counselor, there was never a century without them. There were barely any decades without them. Some years had several running at the same time. The archive room fell silent. Somewhere in the distance, a cooling system hummed. Yema had processed the Drethari, who had fought 2 wars in their million-year history. She had processed the Melori, who considered a single ancient battle to be their greatest shame. She had never heard anything like this. How many? Yema asked. Her voice had changed, quieter now. Drell scrolled through his tablet. If we're counting major conflicts only, with significant casualties and lasting political impact, probably somewhere around 300 in the last 1,000 years alone. 300. Give or take, depends on how you define major. Paula stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to verify the translation matrix, she said. Her voice was shaking. She left the room quickly. Yema watched her go. Then she turned back to Drell. The human was still sitting there, patient and calm. He looked like someone waiting for his number to be called at a government office. Mr. Hansen, Yema said slowly, the average species in our coalition has experienced 1 to 3 major intraspecies conflicts in their entire history. Some have never had any. The Sylvian, my own people, fought one civil disagreement 4,000 years ago. We still mourn those 12 deaths. Drell's eyebrows rose. 12. It was devastating. The human was quiet for a moment. Yema could not read his expression. Human faces were strange, too soft, too mobile, but something flickered in his eyes that might have been sadness. Counselor, he said gently, in one of our wars, which lasted 4 years, we lost approximately 20 million people. Yema felt her legs weaken. She gripped the edge of her desk. 20 million, she repeated. The number felt impossible in her mouth. That was World War I, the first global conflict. Drell's voice remained steady. We numbered them because we knew there would be more. There were more. World War II came about 20 years later. That one killed somewhere between 70 and 85 million. The data screens around Yema flickered. She realized her hands were shaking, disrupting the touch controls. In 300 years of this work, her hands had never shaken. How, she whispered, how does a species survive such things? Drell considered the question. He looked down at his tablet, then back up at Yema. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she had not heard before. We rebuild, he said simply. We bury our dead, we make promises to do better, sometimes we keep them, sometimes we do not. He paused. But we survive, we always survive. Yema's communication device buzzed. A message from the High Archivist requesting her presence. Word was spreading. She had expected to file a routine report today. Instead, she would be explaining something that defied explanation. I will need to pause this interview, she told Drell. Additional officials must be consulted. Of course, Drell nodded. Take your time, we have a lot more history to cover. Yema stood, her legs felt uncertain beneath her. At the door, she turned back. The human was looking at his tablet again, scrolling through what she now understood were records of death on a scale she could not imagine. Mr. Hansen, she said, do your people regret these wars? Drell looked up. His expression was complicated, sad and tired and something else, something harder. Every single one, he said. And we remember every single one. That is the least we can do. Yema left the room. Behind her, the human continued his silent reading, surrounded by the weight of history that no other species in the galaxy could understand. 3 officials sat where one had sat before. The archive room felt smaller now, crowded with tension and disbelief. High Archivist Brennell had catalogued more species than anyone alive. His shell was gray with age, his movements slow but precise. He had come because he believed there was an error. Errors could be fixed. Errors made sense. Admiral Cosson filled the space beside him. The Drethari was massive, his scales catching the light whenever he shifted. His species had a warrior history, which meant 2 battles fought 100,000 years apart. He had come because the military needed to assess this new species. Counselor Yema sat in her usual place, but nothing about this felt usual anymore. Drell Hansen remained in the same chair. He had been offered food and rest. He had declined both. He seemed to understand that what came next mattered. Let us begin again, Brennell said. His voice carried the calm authority of centuries. You claim your species has engaged in multiple major conflicts. That is correct, Drell said. Within a single millennium. Within every millennium, actually, but yes. Brennell's eyes, ancient and clouded, focused on Drell. Describe one. Drell nodded. In the year 1914, by our calendar, a war began in a region called Europe. It spread across our world. We called it the Great War, believing nothing could ever be worse. He paused. We were wrong about that. The conflict lasted 4 years. 20 million died. Millions more were wounded in ways their bodies and minds never recovered from. 20 million, Cosson repeated. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. In 4 years. Yes. How did it end? Exhaustion. Mostly, one side ran out of resources before the other. We signed agreements, drew new borders. Drell's expression flickered. The agreements were not good enough. 21 years later, we did it again. Brennell leaned forward. Define again. Another world war, bigger this time. New weapons, new methods of killing. We had learned from the first war, you see. We had become more efficient. The word hung in the air, efficient. This second war, Yema said quietly, how many? Between 70 and 85 million dead. We are not certain of the exact number. Some deaths were never properly counted. Cosson stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. He walked to the window, staring out at the stars beyond the station. His massive hands gripped the frame. How, he asked without turning, how does any species survive such losses? We have a large population, Drell said. At the time of the Second War, we had about 2 billion people. We have 8 billion now. You grew, Brennell said. After losing nearly 100 million in 2 conflicts, your population increased. Yes, in less than one of your centuries. We are very determined, Drell said. Something almost like humor touched his voice. Some might say stubborn. Cosson turned from the window, his yellow eyes fixed on Drell with an intensity that would have frightened most beings. Drell met his gaze without flinching. These 2 wars, Cosson said, they were your worst. In terms of total deaths, yes. In terms of efficiency of killing, perhaps not. In terms of cruelty, Drell's jaw tightened. There have been many contenders. Tell me about the others. How much time do you have, Admiral? Brennell raised a hand before Cosson could respond. Give us a sample, the range of your conflicts. Drell thought for a moment. We once fought a war for over 100 years. It was about territory and succession rights. We have fought wars over religious differences, arguing about the correct way to worship the same deity. We have fought wars for resources, for political ideology, for pride. We have fought wars that began with a single assassination and wars that began with arguments about taxes. Taxes, Yema repeated faintly. A war over economic disagreement lasted 8 years and killed 600,000. Brennell consulted his data. His old fingers trembled slightly as he worked the screen. According to our records, the average species experiences one major conflict per 2,000 years. Most conflicts last months, not years. Casualties rarely exceed thousands. We are not average, Drell said. No, Cosson agreed, you are not. Silence fell over the room. The weight of numbers pressed down on everyone except the human, who seemed accustomed to carrying it. There is something else you should know, Drell said. During many of these conflicts, we developed new technologies, faster travel, better medicine, improved communication. Some of our greatest advances came from the pressure of war. You innovate through violence, Brennell said. We innovate through necessity. Violence often provides the necessity. Cosson returned to his seat. When he spoke, his voice was different, quieter. I would like to request that Earth's full military history be classified at the highest level. Brennell looked at him sharply. On what grounds? On the grounds that if other species see these numbers, they will either flee from humanity or attempt to destroy them before they spread further. Cosson's scales rippled with something that might have been fear or respect. Either reaction would be a mistake. Why, Yema asked. Cosson looked at Drell. The human looked back, steady and patient. Because any species that has survived what they have survived, Cosson said slowly, is not one we can afford to make an enemy, and not one we can afford to ignore. Drell said nothing. He did not need to. The numbers spoke for themselves, echoing through the room long after the meeting ended. Ambassador Civ was the smallest being in the room and the most dangerous. The Mallory stood barely a meter tall, with silver skin that shimmered like moonlight on water. Her people communicated through thought as easily as breath, reading emotions and intentions with a touch. She had been called to understand the humans. After 3 days of reading reports, she was not sure understanding was possible. The private conference room held 4 people. Drell Hansen sat beside a new human, Dr. Rhea Okonkwo, a woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair. Admiral Cosson stood near the door, watching everything, and Civ sat at the center, preparing to do something she had never done with such caution before. I will need to touch your mind, she told Drell. Briefly, with your permission. Go ahead, Drell said. I have nothing to hide. Civ reached out with one delicate hand. Her fingers brushed Drell's temple. She opened her awareness and stepped into the human mind. Noise, chaos, a storm of thoughts crashing against each other like waves in a hurricane. Civ gasped and pulled back immediately, stumbling from her chair. Cosson moved to catch her, but she waved him away. Ambassador, Dr. Okonkwo asked with concern, are you all right? Civ steadied herself against the table. Her silver skin had gone pale. Your minds, she whispered. They are so loud. Loud, Drell asked. Conflicted, you argue with yourselves constantly. Every thought meets another thought that opposes it. Every feeling wars with another feeling. Civ looked at Drell with something between horror and amazement. How do you function? Dr. Okonkwo smiled gently. We call it being human. The internal conflicts are normal for us. Normal, Civ repeated. She returned to her seat slowly, keeping her hands to herself now. Your species fights wars outside. I see now that you also fight wars inside, every moment of every day. That is one way to look at it, Dr. Okonkwo agreed. We have many competing desires and fears. We want safety but crave excitement. We love peace but prepare for war. We are capable of great kindness and great cruelty, sometimes in the same hour. Carson stepped closer. This internal conflict, does it make them unpredictable? Civ shook her head slowly. Not unpredictable, complex. They contain multitudes, Admiral, more than any species I have ever touched. Is that why they fight so much? Carson asked. Perhaps, or perhaps the external fighting is an expression of the internal chaos. Civ studied the humans with new eyes. You are fascinating and terrifying. Drell shifted in his chair. There is something else you should know, something about our weapons. We have reviewed your weapons technology, Carson said. Primitive compared to Coalition standards. Our current weapons, yes, but during one of our conflicts we developed something different. Drell's voice grew heavy. We learned to split the atom, to create explosions that could destroy entire cities in seconds, radiation that would poison the land for generations. The room went cold. You created world-ending weapons, Civ said. It was not a question. Yes, two nations developed them around the same time. They became enemies afterward. For nearly 50 years, both sides pointed these weapons at each other. Enough. Weapons to destroy all life on our planet several times over. Carson's scales had gone rigid. You held the power to end your species, and you did not use it. We came close, several times, mistakes, misunderstandings, moments of fear. Drell exhaled slowly. But we chose not to, every time someone chose not to. Why, Civ asked. Because we understood what would happen if we did. We called it mutually assured destruction. If one side attacked, the other would respond. Everyone would die, so no one attacked. Civ stared at him. You prevented war through the promise of total annihilation. Yes. And you still have these weapons. Yes. What stops you from using them now? Drell met her silver eyes. We decided not to. The simplicity of the answer hung in the air. Civ reached out with her awareness, not touching but sensing. She felt the truth of his words, not a treaty or a law or a physical barrier, just a choice. Billions of beings, generation after generation, choosing not to end everything. You are insane, she said finally. All of you, your entire species. Probably, Dr. Okonkwo agreed. You built the means to destroy yourselves completely. You spent decades threatening to use it, and then you simply chose not to. We are still choosing, Drell said, every day. Civ was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice held something new, respect perhaps, or the beginning of it. I have touched the minds of over 100 species, she said. I have never encountered one like yours. You are the most violent beings I have ever studied. You are also somehow the most restrained. You have the power to destroy everything, and you choose moment by moment not to. That is the human condition, Dr. Okonkwo said softly. We live with the knowledge of what we could do. We try to be better than our worst impulses. Do you succeed? The two humans looked at each other. Something passed between them that Civ could not read, even with her gifts. Sometimes, Drell said. Not always, but we keep trying. Civ nodded slowly. She understood now why the Coalition needed to proceed carefully with these strange, contradictory creatures. They were not just dangerous because of their capacity for violence. They were dangerous because they knew their capacity for violence and carried it anyway, every single day, choosing peace against their own nature. That was more frightening than any weapon. The training arena echoed with the sounds of controlled combat. Young soldiers from a dozen species moved through exercises, their movements precise and careful. Every strike was measured. Every defense was textbook perfect. Commander Bates Sullivan watched from the observation platform with her arms crossed. She had spent 20 years in the Marines. She had seen real combat on 3 continents. What she saw below looked like dancing, not fighting. Admiral Carson stood beside her, along with Drell Hansen. Captain Oren, a Drethari training officer, was explaining the program with obvious pride. Our warriors train for 4 years before deployment, Oren said. They master defense protocols, negotiation techniques, and minimal force doctrines. A coalition soldier's primary goal is to end conflicts without casualties. Admirable, Drell said diplomatically. Bate said nothing. She watched a trainee execute a perfect dodge, followed by a precisely controlled counterstrike that stopped exactly 2 centimeters from the opponent's body. Commander Sullivan, Oren addressed her. You were a warrior among your people. What do you think of our methods? Bate considered her words carefully. You train for the fights you expect to have. Of course. We train for the fights we hope we never have. Oren's head tilted, the Drathari gesture of confusion. Explain. Bate descended the stairs to the arena floor. The trainees stopped their exercises, watching the small human with curiosity. She was shorter than most of them, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined with years of sun and stress. You train for defense, Bate said, for controlled responses, for ending fights quickly and cleanly. She looked around at the young faces. What do you do when the enemy does not follow your rules? Coalition forces have protocols for. No, Bate's voice was sharp. Not protocols, reality. What happens when you are outnumbered, outgunned? When your supply lines are cut and your communications are jammed and you have not slept in 3 days and the enemy keeps coming. Silence filled the arena. Human warfare is not about perfect techniques, Bate continued. It is about surviving when everything goes wrong. It is about fighting with broken equipment and empty stomachs and the knowledge that no one is coming to save you. How do you train for that? A young trainee asked. Bates smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. You cannot train for it completely. You can only prepare your mind to adapt, to improvise, to refuse to die. Cosson stepped forward. Tell them about asymmetric warfare. Bate nodded. In our history, there have been many times when one side had superior technology, superior numbers, superior everything. By all logic, they should have won quickly and completely. She paused. They often did not. How? Oren asked. Because the weaker side refused to fight the way the stronger side expected. They hid in forests and mountains. They attacked at night. They used the enemy's own weapons against them. They made every inch of ground cost more than it was worth. Guerrilla warfare, Drell added quietly. Yes, and it worked, again and again throughout our history. Farmers defeated empires, rebels overthrew governments, small groups of determined fighters held off armies. A trainee raised her hand. She was Mallory, young and silver-skinned. What if the enemy had weapons far beyond your own, ships that could destroy cities from orbit? Bates' smile widened. Then we would learn to shoot down their ships, or capture them, or find where they land and be waiting for them. She looked around the room. Humans have fought tanks with bottles of burning fuel. We have made bombs from farm supplies. We have turned everyday objects into weapons because we refuse to accept that any fight is unwinnable. That sounds desperate, Oren said. It is desperate. It is also effective. Bate moved to a training dummy and examined it. You train your soldiers to fight fair. We train ours to fight to win. Sometimes that means breaking rules. Sometimes it means doing things that haunt you afterward. But it means surviving. The arena was completely silent now. Every eye was on the small human woman who spoke of war like others spoke of weather. Cosson cleared his throat. Commander Sullivan has been invited to consult on coalition defensive strategies. Oren's scales rippled with surprise. Admiral. Our enemies have learned to predict our tactics, Cosson said. They know our protocols, they expect our responses. Perhaps it is time they faced something unexpected. Bate turned to face the trainees, her expression softened slightly. I am not saying your methods are wrong. They come from a better place than ours, a place with fewer scars. She touched her left arm, where an old wound left a pale line on her brown skin. But sometimes the universe is not fair. Sometimes you need soldiers who can adapt to chaos, who can survive the impossible. You want us to become like humans? The Mallory trainee asked. No, Bate shook her head. I want you to understand us, because one day we might fight beside you, and when that day comes, you need to know what we are capable of." "And what is that?" Orin asked. Bate looked at Cosson. The Admiral nodded. "Everything," Bate said simply. "We are capable of everything, the best and the worst, creation and destruction, mercy and brutality. That is what makes us dangerous, not our weapons or our numbers, the fact that we have no limits except the ones we choose." She walked back toward the observation platform, her boots echoing in the silence. "I hope you never need soldiers like us," she said without turning. "But if you do, we will be there, and we will not stop until it is over." Rain fell on Geneva. It had been falling all morning, turning the city gray and quiet. The alien delegation walked through the downpour without complaint. They had traveled across the galaxy. A little water would not stop them. The museum was old by human standards. Its walls held 100 years of memory, captured in photographs and objects and words. Maria Santos had worked there for 40 years. Her hair was white now, her hands spotted with age, but her voice remained strong. "Welcome to the Museum of Human Conflict," she said. "I will be your guide today." Ambassador Civ looked around at the entrance hall. Images covered every wall. Soldiers in old uniforms, destroyed cities, faces of the dead and the grieving. "You preserve this," she said. "Why?" "So we remember." Maria began walking slowly down the first corridor. "Memory is our teacher. We cannot become better if we forget what we were." Counselor Yema's compound eyes moved across the photographs. She stopped before an image of a devastated landscape. "What happened here?" "A city called Hiroshima, one of the atomic weapons Drell mentioned." Maria's voice was steady. She had told this story many times. 80,000 people died in seconds. Many more died afterward from sickness and burns. "One weapon," Cosson said quietly. "One weapon, one moment, one decision." Maria moved on. "We built 2 more cities on that ground. Life continued. We always continue." The tour wound through decades of horror. Trenches filled with mud and bodies. Camps designed for killing. Villages burned to ash. Civ had to leave during the section on genocide. The emotional weight of the place was too strong for her telepathic senses. Yema stayed. She stood before a wall of photographs, each showing a face, a name, a date. "Who are these people?" "Victims," Maria said. "We try to remember them as individuals, not just numbers. Each face was a life with hopes and fears and people who loved them." "There are so many." "Yes, too many." Maria touched the glass gently. "My grandmother is on this wall. She was 17 when she was taken to a camp. She survived. Many of her family did not." Cosson moved closer. "You carry this history personally." "All humans do, whether we admit it or not." Maria turned to face the Admiral. "You asked Drell how we live with this knowledge. This is how. We come to places like this. We look at what we did. We feel the weight of it. And then we try every day to be better." They continued to a section on peace movements. Treaties signed. Hands shaken across old battle lines. Former enemies building new friendships. "These nations fought each other?" Yema asked, looking at an image of 2 leaders embracing. "Bitter enemies for centuries. They killed each other's people by the millions." Maria smiled softly. "Now they are allies. Their children grow up together. Their borders are open. It took time and effort and forgiveness, but they found peace." "How is such forgiveness possible?" "It is never easy. It takes generations. Some wounds never fully heal." Maria led them to a window that overlooked a quiet garden. "But we discovered something important. Holding on to hatred hurts us more than it hurts our enemies. So we try to let go, not to forget, but to move forward." Civ had returned, looking pale but composed. "You teach this to your children." "Every generation. We show them the darkness so they can choose the light." Maria gestured to a group of young humans walking through a nearby gallery. "Those children will leave here sad and disturbed, but they will also leave understanding something important about what humans can become if we are not careful." "You use your own shame as a teaching tool," Cosson observed. "Our shame and our pride, both are part of us." Maria turned back to the delegation. We are not proud of these wars, we do not celebrate the killing, but we are proud that we survived, that we rebuilt, that we keep trying to improve despite everything. Yema was quiet for a long moment. Rain continued to fall outside. Finally, she spoke. I think I understand now. Understand what? Drell asked. He had been silent through most of the tour. Why you fight so much, and why you might one day stop. Yema's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Other species evolve past violence over time. They become peaceful through forgetting what violence is. You are different. You become peaceful by remembering exactly how terrible violence can be. Maria nodded slowly. That is perhaps the best summary I have ever heard. You do not hide from your nature, Siv added. You confront it, force yourselves to see it clearly, and then you choose with full knowledge to be something else. We try, Maria said. We fail often, but we try. The tour ended in a room called the Hall of Hope. It contained stories of rescue, of sacrifice, of humans saving each other even in the worst circumstances. Soldiers who protected civilians, strangers who hid refugees, small acts of kindness in the middle of horror. This is also us, Maria said. The darkness and the light, we contain both, we always will. Kassan stood before a photograph of a soldier carrying a child through rubble. You are complicated creatures. The most complicated in the galaxy, perhaps, Maria smiled. But we are trying, every single day we are trying. The rain had stopped when they left. Sunlight broke through the clouds, turning the wet streets silver. Somewhere in the city, children laughed. Life continued as it always did, carrying the weight of history and the hope of something better. The Great Hall of the Coalition had never been so full. Representatives from 300 species filled the curved seats that rose toward a ceiling made of living crystal. Light shifted across their faces in soft waves of color. High Chancellor Voss stood at the center podium. She was ancient, her shell cracked with age, but her mind remained sharp. In her long life, she had welcomed many species into the coalition. None had been as debated as the one before her today. We have reviewed Earth's records, Voss began. We have studied their history, we have met their people. She paused. The Council will now hear final arguments before voting. A delegate from the Sylvine sector rose first. Their violence is unprecedented. In recorded history, no species has killed so many of its own. They are dangerous, unstable. They should be quarantined until they prove themselves peaceful. Murmurs of agreement rippled through parts of the hall. Another delegate stood. They have achieved faster-than-light travel. They will spread regardless of our decision. Better to have them inside the coalition where we can guide them than outside where they might become enemies. More murmurs, less agreement this time. Admiral Kassan rose from his seat. The hall fell silent. When a Drethari warrior wished to speak, others listened. I have spent the past month studying humanity, Kassan said. I have read their histories. I have spoken with their soldiers and their scholars. I have walked through their museums of death. He moved to the center of the hall, his massive form commanding attention. They terrify me. The hall stirred with anxiety. They terrify me, Kassan continued, because they know exactly what they are. Other violent species hide from their nature or deny it. Humans stand before mirrors of their own making and force themselves to see clearly. They build monuments to their failures. They teach their children about atrocities. They carry the weight of their history and still choose every morning to be better. He turned to face the full assembly. That is not the behavior of monsters. That is the behavior of a species fighting against its own worst instincts and winning slowly, generation by generation. Ambassador Siv stood next. Her silver form seemed to glow in the crystal light. I touched a human mind. It was chaos, conflict, internal warfare that never stops. She paused. But within that chaos, I found something remarkable. They question themselves constantly. Every decision, every action, every belief is tested against an internal resistance. They trust nothing easily, not even themselves. She walked forward. That is why they survived. That is why they created weapons that could destroy their world and chose not to use them. not because they are good or evil, but because they never stop asking which one they are. Chancellor Voss nodded slowly. Counselor Yema, you began this process. What is your conclusion? Yema rose from her seat. Her forearms were steady now, no longer shaking as they had when she first heard the numbers. When humans arrived at my archive, I expected a simple intake. I found something else entirely. She approached the podium. I have cataloged over 200 species. I have never met one that confused me so deeply. She turned to face the assembly. Most species are violent or peaceful, simple categories. Humans are both, simultaneously, constantly. They contain the capacity for terrible destruction and equally terrible love. They can build cities and burn them within the same century. They can create art that makes you weep and weapons that make you despair. Her voice softened. But here is what I realized. They are not violent despite being civilized. They became civilized because they understand violence so completely. They have seen what they can do, they remember it, and they spend every day trying to become something else. The hall was silent. Voss spoke quietly. Mr. Hansen, you have been our primary contact. Would you like to address the council? Drell stood slowly. He walked to the center of the hall, a single human surrounded by 300 species who were deciding his world's fate. He looked small and fragile and somehow completely unafraid. I will not pretend we are better than we are, he said. We have done terrible things. We have killed each other for reasons that seem foolish even to us. We have destroyed and burned and broken our own world more times than I can count. He looked around the hall. But we also rebuilt every single time. We buried our dead and held our survivors and started again. We made promises to do better. Sometimes we kept them, sometimes we failed, but we never stopped trying. His voice grew stronger. We are not asking you to forgive our past. We are not asking you to trust us blindly. We are asking for a chance to prove that we can be more than our history. He met Chancellor Voss's eyes. We are what we are. We have been monsters. We have been heroes, usually both at once. But we are also trying every single day to tip the balance, to be a little more hero than monster, to leave something better than we found. Silence held the hall. Then Voss spoke. The council will vote. It took only moments. The lights on the voting consoles flickered across the great hall. When the count finished, Voss nodded slowly. Earth is accepted as a full member of the Galactic Coalition. Applause broke out, not from everyone, but from enough. Drell closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet. 10 years later, on a distant world, a young Sylvian student sat in a history class. The lesson was about humanity. Teacher, the student asked, why did humans fight so many wars? The teacher, old and patient, considered the question. Because they cared deeply about things, territory, family, ideas. They cared enough to fight for them. But why did they stop? The teacher smiled. They have not stopped, not entirely, but they keep choosing to try. Every generation makes the same choice their ancestors made, to build instead of destroy, to heal instead of hurt. The teacher paused. The question was never why they fought. The question is why they keep choosing peace despite knowing how easy war would be. The student thought about this for a long time. They sound exhausting, she said finally. The teacher laughed. They are, but they are also our allies now, and I cannot think of any species I would rather have standing beside us when darkness comes. Outside the classroom window, stars burned cold and bright. Somewhere among them, humanity continued its endless struggle, falling and rising, destroying and creating, choosing moment by moment to be better than they were. It was the most human thing of all.